Goethe, the great German writer, wrote the most famous quote about Sicily. To have seen Italy without having seen Sicily is not to have seen Italy at all. And boy was he right. Sicily has all the things Italy is known for: erupting volcanoes, strong earthquakes, and Europe's most dangerous mafia. But also, and this is the part travel agencies prefer to lead with, some of the finest food and architecture spanning 3 millennia of human history. Sicily alone has 7 UNESCO sites, which is more than most entire countries. The infrastructure can be patchy. The bureaucracy is Kafkaesque. Driving here requires nerves of a particular temper. The heat in summer is uncomfortable, and the gap between Sicily's cultural heritage and the resources allocated to its preservation is dispiriting. You will find churches of great historical significance that are locked shut with no indication of when, if ever, they might open. You will visit a museum that closes for lunch at 1 o'clock and reopens at 4, or possibly 4:30, or possibly not at all if someone has a dentist appointment. But these frustrations are, in their way, part of the Sicily experience. If you want Swiss precision, travel to Switzerland. If you want something considerably more interesting and authentic, go to Sicily. Mount Etna is the tallest active volcano in Europe. It's also Sicily's most famous and most dangerous landmark. The eastern Sicilian coast faces the Ionian Sea, which means Etna is positioned in one of the most tectonically active regions in all of Europe. Etna is about 3,357 meters tall. I say about because, and this is true, the height keeps changing. It erupts, it gains a few meters. Something collapses, it loses a few meters. Scientists can't give you a definitive height. They just sort of guess. So if you're the type to care about exact summit elevations, Etna is going to be a source of ongoing frustration for you. The whole eastern flank of the volcano is also slowly sliding into the sea. The entire side of the mountain is moving southeast at a few centimeters a year. Scientists discovered this and published papers about it. They say the eastern flank is gravitationally unstable and may experience catastrophic collapse at some point in the geological future. Some point in the geological future, that could mean 100,000 years. That could also mean Tuesday. They don't know. And people live there. 300,000 residents in the city of Catania alone, right at the base. If you ask them, why would you do that to yourself? You always get the same answer. The soil is very fertile. The soil is fertile because the volcano keeps fertilizing it with molten rock. That's not agriculture. That sounds more like a deeply dysfunctional relationship. Yeah, the volcano destroyed my house, but you should see the tomatoes this year. The name is my favorite bit. The Sicilians call it Mongibello, and Mongibello comes from the Latin mons, meaning mountain, and the Arabic jabal, which also means mountain. Just in case anyone was confused about what this 3,000-meter high cone of fire was. Is that a mountain? No, sir, it's a mountain. There is a cable car on the southern flank of Etna, the Funivia dell'Etna. It takes you from 1,900 meters up to 2,500 meters. The cable car was destroyed by an eruption in 1971. They rebuilt it. It was destroyed again by an eruption in 1983. They rebuilt it. It was destroyed a third time by an eruption in 2002. Guess what? They rebuilt it. In the same spot. What's the plan here? At what point does someone in the planning meeting raise their hand and say, lads, have we considered slightly to the left? You can buy a ticket for €30 for a cable car with a 100% historical destruction rate. Those are not odds I love. That's not a safety record, that's a dare. At the top of the cable car you have options. You can take a minibus further up the volcano for another €25, or you can walk. The walking is free, which is nice. Everything else about the walking isn't nice. The ground is loose volcanic gravel. Every step you take, you slide back half a step. It's like walking on a treadmill made of broken biscuits. Above 2,900 meters, you need a guide. This is mandatory, and people keep complaining about it. But the summit has 4 active craters. There are also invisible pockets of carbon dioxide that can suffocate you. There are sudden steam explosions when lava meets snow. In 2017, a BBC camera crew got hit by one of these. 10 people got injured. There are 2 ski resorts. You can ski on the volcano while it's active, and the tourism board, this is their selling point. They say, you can ski in the morning and swim in the Mediterranean in the afternoon. And that's technically true. It's also technically true that you can ski in the morning and be vaporized by lava in the afternoon, but they leave that part out. That's what I call selective marketing. Living in the shadow of Etna, Catania was never destined for a quiet history. In March 1669, Etna produced one of its largest eruptions. The eruption began with the opening of a fissure on the southern flank of the volcano, at an elevation of 800 meters. Over the following weeks, a massive lava flow descended the slope toward Catania. The lava reached the western walls of the city in April 1669. The walls, which had been built to stop human attackers, proved to be only partially effective against several million cubic meters of lava. A portion of the lava flow was diverted by the city walls and entered the sea to the south, but another portion breached the walls and destroyed a section of the western part of the city. The death toll from the eruption itself was relatively modest by the standards of major volcanic disasters. Estimates suggest that 20,000 people were displaced, and several villages on Etna's slopes were destroyed entirely. The damage to Catania's infrastructure and agricultural hinterland, however, was severe. If the 1669 eruption was bad, the earthquake of 1693 was catastrophic. On January 11, 1693, a massive earthquake struck the Val di Noto region of southeastern Sicily. It is estimated to have been magnitude 7.4, which would be one of the strongest earthquakes in Italian recorded history. The earthquake and its aftershocks devastated at least 70 towns across southeastern Sicily. Catania was among the worst affected. The earthquake struck in the late afternoon, and the destruction was near total. Contemporary accounts described the collapse of the majority of the city's buildings, including the cathedral, churches, monasteries, and the university. Estimates of the death toll in Catania alone range from 12,000 to 16,000 out of a pre-earthquake population of 20,000. Across southeastern Sicily as a whole, the 1693 earthquake killed an estimated 60,000 people. This was one of the deadliest natural disasters in European history. This was, by any measure, a disaster of enormous scale. It was also, in an outcome that is darkly ironic, an opportunity. The reconstruction of Catania after 1693 produced the city that, in broad architectural terms, exists today. The predominant building material used in the reconstruction was local lava stone, dark grey to black basalt, quarried from solidified Etna lava flows, combined with white limestone from the High Blean Plateau to the south. This combination gives Catania its visual character, buildings of dark volcanic stone accented with white limestone detailing. The architect most associated with post-1693 Catania is Giovanni Battista Vaccarini, a Palermo-born architect who trained in Rome and brought Roman Baroque influences to Sicily's eastern coast. Vaccarini designed or contributed to many of Catania's most prominent buildings: the facade of the Cathedral of Sant'Agata, the town hall, and the elephant fountain in the centre of Piazza del Duomo, which has become the symbol of Catania. Today, Catania is the second largest city in Sicily after Palermo and one of the 10 largest cities in Italy. The population of Catania, like that of many southern Italian cities, has experienced some decline in recent decades as younger residents have migrated to northern Italy or abroad in search of employment. The area around Catania has a concentration of technology and electronics businesses, sometimes called the Etna Valley, a conscious echo of Silicon Valley, though the comparison should not be pushed too far. The Amunano River, which once flowed openly through Catania, now runs almost entirely underground beneath the modern city. It was channeled into subterranean passages by centuries of urban development. Speaking of underground, Catania has a metro. The Metropolitana di Catania is one of the smallest metro systems in Europe, and it doesn't go anywhere useful. It goes from the city centre to A place you don't need to go, and back. That's it. That's the metro. Extensions have been planned since the fall of the Berlin Wall. The projected completion dates have been revised so many times. There's a local saying, the Catania metro will be finished when Etna stops erupting, and Etna will stop erupting when the Catania metro is finished. For the city centre, walking is often the most practical and pleasant option. The Baroque core is compact, and most major attractions are within walking distance of one another. The motorway network connects Catania to Messina, Palermo and Syracuse. The port handles both commercial and passenger traffic. The Catania airport is the busiest in Sicily. For travellers arriving in Sicily from the air, Catania is often the first point of contact with the island, a role that gives the city an importance that extends beyond its own boundaries. Taormina is one of the most recognisable resort towns in Italy. It's a small town welded to a cliff on Sicily's east coast, 200 metres above the Ionian Sea. Taormina's history is genuinely wild, and knowing even a bit of it makes the place about 10 times more interesting to walk around. A group of Greek colonists who'd been booted out of nearby Naxos established Taorminian in the 4th century BC. They carved a theatre into the hillside, the second largest in Sicily, with sightlines towards both the sea and the volcano. Romans expanded the theatre, adjusted the stage, added seating, and repurposed the space for their own somewhat bloodier tastes in entertainment. They also improved roads, added baths and villas. Was Taormina the centre of imperial power? Not at all. It was a pleasant outpost with some strategic value and nice weather. Later, control of Taormina shifted to the Byzantines, then to the Arabs, then to the Normans. Each group left architectural traces. In the 19th century, a new kind of invasion began. Rich young British men, funded by Daddy's estate and in need of culture, would sweep through Italy collecting experiences. Taormina was a mandatory stop. Ruins, views, nice weather, not too challenging intellectually. Perfect. D.H. Lawrence lived there for a stretch. Oscar Wilde also passed through. Today, Taormina is often presented as timeless, but it's also been almost entirely consumed by tourism, and in places so polished for tourist consumption that the authenticity has been sanded away. Taormina's relationship with tourism is long and profitable. The town receives 1.5 million visitors per year. This creates predictable effects. Prices in the town centre are high by Sicilian standards. A meal at a restaurant on or near Corso Umberto can cost 2 to 3 times what you'd pay for equivalent food in Catania or Palermo. The peak season crowds can be intense. Corso Umberto at midday in August is not for the claustrophobic. The Greek theatre similarly gets very busy. Taormina is basically one street. The Corso Umberto runs east to west through the old town, with Porta Messina at one end and Porta Catania at the other. It's about 800 metres long. Everything you want is on it or near it. The Corso is paved in stone that becomes an ice rink when wet. Every third shop here is selling ceramics. Ceramic plates, ceramic heads, ceramic lemons. Will you buy one? Yes. Will you carry it home? Yes. Will a ceramic lemon improve your life in Manchester? No, but you'll buy it. The Greek theatre is the reason many people come to Taormina in the first place. It's surely one of the most impressive ancient theatres in the Mediterranean. It is open to the public most days. You can sit on the stone tiers and admire the coastline without needing a degree in archaeology. There is an entrance fee, as with most major archaeological sites in Italy. You can reach Taormina by train. The train station is called Taormina Giardini, and it is, not really in Taormina. It's at the bottom of the cliff in Giardini Naxos, which is a different town. So you get off the train, you look around, you see a road, some shops and a kebab place, and you think, oh boy, this is the most overrated town in Europe. But no, you're just in the wrong town. Taormina is up the hill. Isola Bella lies below Taormina at sea level. It's a small, beautiful island connected to the shore by a thin strip of sand, declared a nature reserve in 1990. At low tide, you can walk across the sandbar. Higher water means wading. There is a small entry fee to get onto the island itself. The surrounding beach is split between free public sections and paid Lido areas. You can get down there using cable car from Via Luigi Pirandello, or you can drive down, hoping desperately for parking, or walk down down a steep path that's pretty, but you will eventually have to walk back up. The beach is pebbles, not sand, just so you know. Sicilian beaches tend toward rock and pebble. The water is gorgeous. It's clear and great for snorkeling around the island's rocks. If you can get a spot without being elbow to elbow with other people, it's a fine way to spend half a day. Before we continue this journey, please hit the like button and subscribe to World Travel Guide. Palermo is the capital city of Sicily. It's the sort of place where a 5-minute walk can transport you from a Norman cathedral to an Arab-influenced market to a Baroque church, all before you've finished your espresso. The city sits in a natural amphitheatre formed by a broad, fertile plain known as the Conca d'Oro, or Golden Basin. The name comes from the citrus groves that once covered the plain. Much of that agricultural land has since been replaced by concrete, a process accelerated during the post-war construction boom of the 1950s and 1960s. The oranges were, by most accounts, better to look at. Monte Pellegrino, a 606-metre promontory, dominates the northern edge of the city. Goethe, during his visit in 1787, described it as the most beautiful headland in the world, which was generous of him. Regardless, it is very imposing and gives you nice panoramic views of the city. Palermo has a population of 650,000 people. It's the 5th largest city in Italy after Rome, Milan, Naples and Turin. This makes Palermo comfortably the largest city in Sicily. To put it another way, 1 in 4 people living in Sicily lives in or around Palermo. Like much of southern Italy, Palermo experienced emigration between the 1950s and 1970s, when large numbers of Sicilians relocated to northern Italy and Germany. This outflow has slowed considerably, and in recent decades, Palermo has become a recipient of immigration, mostly from North Africa. The result is a city that is, by southern Italian standards, relatively diverse. The historic Ballarò market area, in particular, has a pronounced multicultural character. The city's economy is heavily service-oriented. Tourism has grown considerably over the past 2 decades. Sicily has become one of the more fashionable Mediterranean travel destinations, and Palermo has benefited enormously from this trend. But the city's infrastructure hasn't kept pace with the growing number of visitors. You can't talk about Palermo without mentioning the elephant in the room, which is not technically an elephant. Palermo, as the capital of Sicily, has historically been the operational centre of Cosa Nostra, the Sicilian mafia. The organisation's influence on the city's politics and urban development during the 20th century was huge and in many respects catastrophic. The so-called Sack of Palermo, the post-war construction boom that demolished Art Nouveau villas and replaced them with unlicensed concrete apartment blocks, was not really a failure of urban planning. It was, in large part, a mafia-driven operation, facilitated by corrupt politicians and contractors linked to Cosa Nostra. Today, the mafia still operates, mainly through extortion rackets. However, its power and influence have diminished from the heights of the early 1990s. Palermo has an embarrassment of riches when it comes to things to see. The density of churches alone is enough to occupy several days, and the markets and palaces add further layers. The Cathedral of Palermo is a large and architecturally complicated building. It has been modified and expanded so many times over the centuries that it incorporates elements of Arab, Norman, Gothic, Baroque, and neoclassical design. The result is a fascinating palimpsest of architectural history. The royal tombs inside contain the remains of Roger II, Frederick II, and other medieval rulers of Sicily. The Palazzo dei Normanni is the oldest royal residence in Europe and was built during the 9th century Arab period. The Normans expanded and embellished it, and it is now the seat of the Sicilian Regional Assembly. The Teatro Massimo is the largest opera house in Italy and the 3rd largest in Europe. It's an imposing neoclassical building that was completed in 1897 after 22 years of construction. Palermo's street markets are among the most chaotic in Europe. Ballarò is the largest and most energetic of the 3. You will find all kinds of fruit, fish, household goods and things that you did not know you needed, and in most cases, really do not need. The port of Palermo is one of the largest and busiest ports in Sicily and the wider Mediterranean. Located along the city's northern waterfront, it has been in continuous use since the Phoenicians established their settlement here nearly 3 millennia ago. The minimum useful stay in Palermo is 3 full days. This allows enough time to see the major attractions, at least 2 of the 3 markets, while also allowing for leisurely meals and aimless wandering. If you plan to use the city as a base for exploring Western Sicily, you could comfortably spend a week without running out of things to do. Palermo is really one of the most rewarding cities in Europe to visit. The food is superb. The architecture ranges from the sublime to the bewildering, and sometimes manages both simultaneously. The people are warm and eager to feed you things. The weather is good, the coffee is excellent, only the traffic is terrifying. If you travel to Sicily by conventional means, Messina is almost certainly the first Sicilian city you will encounter. It is the gateway to Sicily, and it's a city with a spectacularly unlucky history. On the 28th of December 1908, an earthquake measuring an estimated 7.1 on the moment magnitude scale struck the Strait of Messina. The earthquake was followed by a tsunami with waves up to 12 meters high. Messina was almost completely destroyed. 100,000 people died in Messina alone. Across the strait in Calabria, thousands more died. Today, Messina is the 3rd largest city in Sicily and has more than 200,000 inhabitants. Tourism here is largely a matter of passing trade. Cruise ships dock in the harbour with some regularity, and their passengers stay for a few hours and return to the ship. Day trippers from Taormina sometimes make the trip, but extended stays in Messina itself are relatively rare. The Cathedral of Messina is the most important architectural monument of the city. What you see today is largely a 20th century reconstruction, though it incorporates some surviving medieval elements. Attached to the cathedral's bell tower is one of the largest and most complex astronomical clocks in the world. It's 60 feet tall and has a system of mechanical figures that activate at noon each day in a sequence lasting about 15 minutes. Messina sits at the very northeastern corner of Sicily, directly across a narrow body of water from the Italian mainland, specifically from the Calabrian town of Villa San Giovanni and a little further south, the city of Reggio Calabria. The body of water in question is the Strait of Messina, and it is one of the most important and politically contentious stretches of water in the Mediterranean. It separates the Tyrrhenian Sea to the north from the Ionian Sea to the south. The strait is narrow, remarkably narrow in fact. At its slimmest point, it measures 3.1 kilometers across. You can see mainland Italy from Messina. On a very clear day, you can probably make out individual Calabrians looking back at you with equal suspicion. On an average day, 11,000 vehicles cross the strait by ferry, along with tens of thousands of passengers. But why isn't there a bridge across the strait? Humanity has built bridges across wider gaps. Well, the Strait of Messina is not a good place to build a bridge. The seismic activity in the region is intense. Any bridge would need to withstand major earthquakes. The strait's depth, which goes up to 250 meters in the central channel, makes conventional pylon-based designs problematic, and it would be an expensive affair. Recent estimates have ranged from 4 to 14 billion euros. Organised crime would probably show interest as well. Multi-billion euro infrastructure projects rarely pass entirely unnoticed. Sicilians are, broadly speaking, proud of their island, protective of their culture, and have been governed by outsiders for most of their history. If you ask a Sicilian whether they want a bridge, you may get a no as an answer and a long digression about the failures of the Italian state. Sicily has no shortage of beautiful coastal towns, and Cefalù is one of the most visited. You'll find it on the northern coast of Sicily, where the mountains drop sharply into the Tyrrhenian Sea. The earliest known settlement dates to around the 5th century BC. The Greeks called it Kefaloidion, a name derived from the Greek word for head, which is a reference to the shape of the rock. The real turning point for Cefalù came in 1131, when Roger II, the Norman king of Sicily, ordered the construction construction of the cathedral. The Normans had conquered Sicily from the Arabs in the late 11th century, and Roger commissioned the cathedral after surviving a storm at sea. Sicily changed hands several more times after the Normans, but Cefalù itself remained a small fishing town through most of these transitions. Travellers started visiting the town in the mid-20th century, when Sicily as a whole started appearing on the itineraries of European tourists who had exhausted the more obvious Italian destinations and were looking for somewhere with reliable sunshine and lower prices. Cefalù had several things working in its favour: a long sandy beach, a photogenic medieval centre, and that cathedral, which even the most architecturally indifferent visitor would struggle to ignore. The 1988 film Cinema Paradiso, directed by Giuseppe Tornatore, was shot partly in Cefalù. Its international success introduced the town to audiences who might otherwise never have located Sicily on a map, let alone a small town on its northern edge. In more recent years, Cefalù has also benefited from the broader trend of travel to Sicily, driven by various television productions and food tourism. Sicily's cuisine has become a great draw, and Cefalù's restaurants serve good versions of the island's standards. The Cathedral of Cefalù is one of the most important examples of Norman architecture in Sicily. The exterior is dominated by two large square towers that flank the western facade. They give the building a profile that looks as much like a fortress as a church. The interior is notable above all for the mosaics in the apse, which date to 1148. The cathedral was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2015 as part of the serial listing Arab-Norman Palermo and the cathedral churches of Cefalù and Monreale. The UNESCO designation has increased visitor numbers, which has been good for the local economy. The coastline here faces due north, which is a mildly unusual orientation for a Sicilian beach town. Most of Sicily's famous coastal spots look south or east. Cefalù, by contrast, catches the afternoon sun at an angle that happens to light up the cathedral facade in a manner that has proved extremely convenient for photographers and the local tourism economy. The town's main beach, the Lungomare, is a crescent of sand that stretches along the northern edge of town. It is one of the better sandy beaches on this coast of Sicily. Most people come to Cefalù for the day from Palermo. Staying longer, though, makes sense, especially if you plan to explore the northern coast or head into the Madonia Mountains. Trenitalia operates a regional rail service along Sicily's northern coast, and Cefalù has its own station on the Palermo-Messina line. The journey from Palermo Centrale takes roughly 1 hour, and the trains are reasonably punctual by Sicilian standards. The station in Cefalù is a short walk from the historic centre and the beach. Syracuse was, for a period, the most powerful city in the entire Mediterranean. That's a fact that tends to bruise the ego of mainland Italy. The city was founded in 734 BC by Greek colonists from Corinth and Naxos, which makes it one of the oldest Greek colonies in Sicily. It quickly outgrew Athens in population and arrogance, fielding a navy that dominated the Mediterranean. Tyrant Hieron II threw money at poets and engineers. Archimedes, his pet genius, ran naked through the streets after a breakthrough in hydrostatics, and invented levers and mirrors to incinerate Roman ships during the siege of 212 BC. When the Romans entered Syracuse, most people fled the city. Archimedes stayed behind to finish a geometry problem. He reportedly told a soldier, "Do not disturb my circles." It was an admirable commitment to mathematics, though not a very successful survival strategy. Romans incorporated Syracuse into the empire and used it mostly as a grain source. The Arab period introduced Syracuse to citrus fruits, sugarcane, and sophisticated irrigation techniques. The big earthquake damaged many buildings here, especially on the island district of Ortigia, but unlike other places in Sicily, Syracuse was not completely destroyed. Large portions of the older city survived, even if badly damaged. Instead of rebuilding the city entirely, Syracuse just received a Baroque facelift. Syracuse today is a mid-sized Sicilian city of around 120,000 people and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It sits roughly halfway down Sicily's eastern coastline, south of Catania and north of the island's southeastern tip at Capo Passaro. The city also lies directly across the Ionian Sea from Greece, which explains why the Greeks landed here in the first place. Syracuse is divided into two very different areas, the historic island of Ortigia, where the city began, and the modern mainland districts that grew up later. If you're walking around mainland Syracuse and notice what appears to be an enormous lemon juicer rising above the apartment blocks, you haven't hallucinated. That is the Santuario della Madonna delle Lacrime, the Sanctuary of Our Lady of Tears. It was built after a small plaster Madonna statue allegedly wept tears in 1953. Mainland Syracuse is cheaper and less noisy at night, but it's less atmospheric, and you'll spend most of your time crossing back to Ortigia anyway, which somewhat defeats the purpose. Ortigia is a small island attached to the mainland by two bridges. It contains the historic core of Syracuse. You can walk across it in about 15 minutes. It's 1 kilometre long, about half a kilometre wide, and has all the things people actually come to see. Piazza del Duomo is, by broad consensus, the finest square in Sicily, and one of the finest in all of Italy. It's a long, gently curved rectangle lined with Baroque buildings. The Syracuse Cathedral is an architectural layer cake. The current Baroque facade conceals the structure of a Greek temple dedicated to Athena. If you walk inside, you can see the original Doric columns embedded in the nave walls. Castello Maniace stands at the southern tip of Ortigia, where the land meets the Ionian Sea. It was built by Frederick II, Holy Roman Emperor and King of Sicily. The castle is a square building with round towers at each corner and a single grand portal. Inside, it's largely empty. Near the entrance to Ortigia, just across the bridge, sit the remains of the Temple of Apollo, the oldest Doric temple in Sicily, dating to the early 6th century BC. Remains is the operative word here. What survived is a platform, a few columns, and some wall fragments. One does not simply drive into Ortigia. The most stress-free approach is to park on the mainland, walk to Ortigia, and forget that you have a car until you need it for a day trip. What happens when molten rock meets cold water? The answer, should you find yourself in northeastern Sicily, is the Alcantara Gorge. The Gola dell'Alcantara, to use its proper Italian name, is a canyon formation carved into basalt rock along the Alcantara River in the province of Messina. The basalt that forms the gorge originated from Etna. The river itself, the Alcantara, runs for 52 kilometers from its source on the slopes of Mount Etna to its mouth at the Ionian Sea near Giardini Naxos. The gorge is only a fraction of this total length, but what a fraction it is. We are speaking of a channel perhaps 6 kilometers long. The walls, formed of columnar basalt, reach heights of up to 50 meters in places. The width at the bottom narrows to as little as 2 meters at certain points, which creates interesting situations when tour groups attempt to pass one another. Alcantara's proximity to both Etna and Taormina makes it somewhat convenient for the sort of traveller who likes to tick off multiple attractions in a single day. The main access point, and for most visitors the only access point, is the Alcantara Gorge Park, operated by a private company. You can find it near the town of Modica on the western bank of the river. There is parking and a ticket office. You can descend to the gorge floor via a lift. The descent covers a vertical distance of perhaps 50 meters. The lift saves your knees on the way down and your cardiovascular system on the way back up. At the bottom, you find yourself on a gravel beach beside the river. The walls of the gorge rise around you. The water in the Alcantara is cold, uncomfortably cold, especially in the narrower upstream sections where sunlight rarely penetrates. This is fed by snowmelt from Etna's higher slopes and by various springs along the route. The further upstream you proceed, the narrower the gorge becomes, and the more impressive the columnar formations. The path eventually becomes impassable for casual visitors. Deeper pools and faster currents mark the limit of the standard tourist experience. San Vito Lo Capo is a small town in the province of Trapani, in the northwest corner of Sicily. It has one main beach and one large mountain behind it. By all conventional metrics, it should be a footnote. Instead, it has one of the most awarded beaches in Europe and a dedicated climbing community. The main beach is a broad crescent of fine, pale sand, closer to Caribbean in appearance than anything most people expect from the Mediterranean. It stretches for 3 kilometers and slopes gently into the sea, which means the water stays shallow for some distance from shore. This makes it great for families with small children. The water is exceptionally clear. Visibility is high because the seabed is sandy and currents keep sediment suspended only briefly. The beach is free to access, as Italian law requires. All beaches in Italy are public up to a certain distance from the waterline. However, the majority of the beach at San Vito Lo Capo is divided into stabilimenti, licensed beach concessions that rent sunbeds and umbrellas for a fee. Directly behind San Vito Lo Capo to the east, Monte Monaco rises to 532 meters. The mountain is hikeable. A trail begins at the eastern edge of town and goes through low scrub and maquis vegetation. The limestone faces offer sport climbing routes across a range of grades. The rock quality is generally good. The climbing community in San Vito Lo Capo has grown over the past 2 decades, and the area now hosts the annual San Vito Climbing Festival, which is usually held in late October. A rental car is the most practical way to reach San Vito Lo Capo and to explore the surrounding area. The drive from Palermo Airport takes roughly 75 minutes. The provincial roads leading to San Vito are narrow and winding, with driving conditions typical of rural Sicily. Trapani is not the first place that comes to mind when someone says Sicily. The city sits at the far western tip of the island, shaped like a sickle. The ancient Greeks called it Drepanon, from the word drepane, meaning sickle. The Romans kept the name, more or less. Trapani has its own airport. This is the first surprise. The Vincenzo Florio Airport is located not in Trapani itself, but in Burgi, 15 kilometers southeast of the city. You can also arrive by train along the Palermo-Trapani line, which takes 2 hours and passes through Sicilian countryside. If you're coming from Tunisia, who doesn't? Trapani has a ferry connection. The crossing takes several hours. This route has existed in some form for centuries, because Trapani is closer to the North African coast than it is to Rome. However one arrives, the first impression is roughly the same. The outskirts are unpromising. Modern Trapani, like many Italian cities, surrounds its historic core with a buffer zone of mid-20th century apartment blocks in that particular shade of beige that communicates not warmth but resignation. The old town of Trapani is a long, narrow grid of streets running along the peninsula. The main artery is the Corso Vittorio Emanuele, which, like 40% of all main streets in Italy, is named after the first king of unified Italy. The remaining 60% are probably divided between Garibaldi, Pavarotti and Bud Spencer. The Cathedral of San Lorenzo sits on the Corso and dates in its current form to the 17th century. The interior contains a painting attributed to Flemish artist Gaspar van Vittel, or Van Vitelli, as Italy Italianized him. Walking westward along the peninsula, you pass through increasingly narrow streets. The buildings are lower, and laundry hangs between facades. You are going to eat in Trapani. Even if you have brought packed lunches, you will eventually succumb to the smell of frying and the sight of pastry cases and the sheer gravitational pull of Sicilian cuisine. The Arab influence is stronger here than in eastern Sicily. Couscous is a staple. So is pasta with pesto alla trapanese, which is not the same as Genoese pesto. Trapani sits at the western tip of Sicily. This made it valuable to every naval power that has operated in the western Mediterranean over the past 3,000 years. Thousands of Sicilians left from Trapani's port, bound for the Americas, North Africa and elsewhere. This diaspora has resulted in Sicilian communities across the world, many of which maintain strong connections to their towns of origin. If you have Sicilian heritage and your family came from the Trapani area, you may find records at the local archives. South of the city, between Trapani and Marsala, lie the Saline di Trapani e Pacheco, the salt flats. The combination of shallow water, mineral deposits and flat terrain creates a landscape of geometrical patterns and shifting colours. Salt has been harvested here since antiquity. The method is simple in principle. Seawater is channeled into shallow basins, evaporation does the work, and the resulting salt is raked into mounds and collected. Erice is a small medieval town that sits high on a hill just above Trapani. It's looking almost like a stone crown above the city. There are two ways to reach Erice. The first is by road. A winding series of switchbacks climbs from Trapani up the mountainside, each hairpin bend offering a new and exciting opportunity to test your rental car insurance. The second method, and the one favoured by people who value their nerves, is the funivia, a cable car that departs from the outskirts of Trapani and delivers you to the edge of Erice in about 10 minutes. The town was, for centuries, a very important place. It controlled the western approaches to Sicily, as it offered clear sightlines in all directions. There are three main gates. The Porta Trapani, on the western side, is the most commonly used entrance for visitors arriving by road or cable car. The first thing you will notice upon entering Erice is the paving. The entire town is laid with cobblestones and flagstones of varying ages and varying degrees of smoothness, none of which were installed with the modern traveller's footwear in mind. If you have chosen to travel to Sicily in sandals or, God forbid, heels, Erice will correct that decision for you within the first 50 metres. The town is small. You can walk from one end to the other in 20 minutes. You can't actually get lost in Erice. The whole town is a triangle. If you walk in any direction for long enough, you hit a wall. The tourist route is intuitive, and the worst consequence of a wrong turn is finding yourself in someone's garden, which is more embarrassing than dangerous. Erice looks like it deserves a UNESCO badge, but it doesn't have one. The architecture is uniformly stone, mostly limestone and tufa. Erice has around 60 churches for a town of 500 residents. This gives Erice the highest church-to-person ratio in Sicily. Castello di Venere, the Castle of Venus, lies at the eastern point of the triangular plateau. It sits on the site of an old Roman temple, and it was constructed by the Normans in the 12th century using materials from the temple itself. This was standard Norman practice. There are towers, walls, and a drawbridge, or rather the remains of where a drawbridge once was. The interior is largely open to the sky. The views from the Castello di Venere are among the best you will encounter while you travel through Sicily. The eastern side overlooks a sheer drop to the plains below. Erice sits at 750 metres above sea level, which places it squarely within the cloud base. Sometimes the town fills with fog so thick and so total that visibility can drop to a matter of metres. There's no reliable way to predict whether Erice will be clear or fogged on any given day. Half a day is enough to see the main sights and eat some pastry. There is no reason to stay overnight unless you really want the experience of being in a Sicilian medieval town after the day trippers have left. Erice is not expensive, but still a bit pricier than nearby Trapani. There are a handful of hotels within the town walls, and a few restaurants stay open for dinner year-round. Ragusa is one of the highest provincial capitals in Sicily, sitting in the Hyblaean Mountains in the southeast of the island, over 500 metres above sea level, which, if you know anything about Sicily, means it's in the part of the island that is furthest from every airport anyone's heard of. The great earthquake we mentioned earlier levelled much of southeastern Sicily. Ragusa, along several other towns in the region, was demolished. The rebuilding was carried out in the Sicilian Baroque style. The original population of Ragusa wanted to rebuild on the same site, which sits on a ridge between two river valleys. A separate faction decided to rebuild lower down on a different part of the plateau entirely. Both factions did exactly what they said they would do. The result is two towns that eventually became one. Ragusa Ibla and Ragusa Superiore were formally unified in 1926. The two parts are connected by roads and steps. The relationship between the two halves of Ragusa is still in negotiation. 300 years later, the people of Ibla still refer to themselves as the original Ragusans, and the people of Superiore consider themselves the ones who were smart enough to build somewhere with level ground. Both positions are defensible. What's less defensible is that they built 30 churches in the lower town alone. Where were all these churchgoers coming from? Were they commuting up from the coast specifically for Mass? We will never know. Ragusa is popular because it has what many people want from Sicily without some of the chaos found elsewhere. It has extraordinary Baroque architecture, a clear historical identity, but also relatively fewer crowds than the island's most obvious headline destinations. It's also visually arresting in a way that requires very little effort from the observer. Ragusa Ibla, of course, is the main draw. It is the older district and the more atmospheric one. The streets are narrow and most buildings are Baroque. The Duomo di San Giorgio is the standout monument, a grand 18th century church with an impressive staircase and one of the finest examples of Sicilian Baroque. There are many churches in Sicily, but this one is worth adjusting your schedule for. Giardino Ibleo is the main public garden in Ragusa Ibla. It gives you a useful pause from stone and stairs. Nearby are several churches and good viewpoints over the valley. Ragusa Superiore has its own attractions. There's the Cathedral of San Giovanni Battista. Palazzi with balconies are everywhere, but the streets have a more modern, urban feel. Although modern here is relative, it is still Sicily. Ragusa is not a place for rushed tourism. It works better when given time. A day trip is possible, but staying at least 1 or 2 nights allows you to see the city before and after the peak daytime flow. Summer in Sicily can be intensely hot, and Ragusa's hills do not improve that. Spring and early autumn are often better for travel. Do not arrive expecting flat terrain. Ragusa provides many things, but level ground is not a major one. The streets in the historic lower town are narrow, sometimes one way, and populated by pedestrians who have the technical right-of-way and the practical certainty that you cannot pass them. Leave the car at a park above and walk down. The nearest coastline is 20 kilometers south, around the town of Marina di Ragusa. The wider province is also important agriculturally. Farming and greenhouse cultivation play a large role. Today, Ragusa forms part of the UNESCO-listed late Baroque towns of the Val di Noto. Sicily has several places on that list, but Ragusa leaves a very strong impression. Just 6 kilometers to the southeast of Ragusa lies Modica, its twin sister. It has the same Baroque architecture and the same honeyed limestone. Modica is built in and around a deep gorge, the confluence of 2 river valleys, the Pozzo dei Pruni and the Ianni Mauro. The geography is, to put it plainly, vertical. The lower town, Modica Bassa, sits on the valley floor. The upper town, Modica Alta, sits along the ridge above. Connecting them are staircases and switchback roads. At the very top of Modica Alta, you'll find the remains of the medieval castle of the Counts of Modica, once the administrative and military centre of the county. What's left of it is a clock tower and some fragmentary walls. The centrepiece of Modica is the Church of San Giorgio. Positioned at the top of a monumental staircase of 250 steps in the upper part of town, San Giorgio is the work of Rosario Gagliardi, an architect from Syracuse, who was responsible for several of the most significant Baroque churches in southeastern Sicily. He designed the facade in the early 18th century, and construction continued into the mid-1700s. The result is a 3-tiered frontispiece with a central tower that rises from the facade itself rather than standing separately. The second major church in Modica is San Pietro, located in the lower town. San Pietro has a broad facade with a monumental staircase lined with statues of the 12 apostles. There's been a long-standing rivalry between the two churches, or rather between the two parishes, over which should be considered the principal church of Modica. This has been going on for centuries, and if you bring it up with a local, prepare for a passionate response. Modica is famous for chocolate. The cioccolato modicano is made using a cold processing technique. What does that mean? It means the cocoa paste is mixed with sugar at a temperature low enough that the sugar crystals do not fully dissolve. The result is a chocolate with a grainy, slightly crumbly texture and a flavour profile that is more intensely cocoa forward than the smooth, conched chocolate that dominates European confectionery. In the 20th century, Modica's importance within Sicily gradually diminished. It had been the provincial capital of the area until 1926, when that status was transferred to Ragusa This did not go down well. There are people in Modica who, if pressed, would still like a word about this. The town settled into a quieter existence, a provincial centre with a grand past, an extraordinary built environment, and a growing reputation for chocolate. The UNESCO designation brought international attention and, with it, tourism. The countryside around Modica is filled with agriturismi, farm stays offering rooms and meals made with ingredients grown on the farm itself. These are a fine option if you're travelling by car, enjoy rural quiet, and want to eat extremely well without having to go anywhere. The Valley of the Temples is not in a valley. This feels like an important thing to establish early on, before anyone books a flight expecting to descend into some lush depression between mountains. The site sits on a limestone ridge on the southern edge of Agrigento, on Sicily's southwestern coast. The Temple Ridge runs east to west, about 3 kilometres south of the modern city centre, and the archaeological park covers some 1,300 hectares. The city that would become Agrigento was founded in 582 BC under the name Akragas by Greek colonists from Gala. The trading routes were favourable and Akragas grew rich. By the 5th century BC, Akragas had a population that scholars estimate at anywhere between 200,000 and 800,000, a range so broad that it is functionally meaningless but large either way. The poet Pindar called it the most beautiful city of mortals. Pindar was a professional praise poet, which means he was paid to say things like that, so perhaps a grain of salt is warranted. The temples were built during this period of extraordinary wealth, primarily in the 5th century BC. The governing logic was Doric: thick columns, no bases, and austere capitals. When was the Valley of the Temples discovered? This is a trick question. The temples were never lost. They were always there, on their ridge, in plain sight, being used and dismantled by the people who lived around them. The Temple of Concordia was converted into a Christian church in the 6th century. Today, it's one of the best preserved Doric temples in the world, with 34 columns still standing. The UNESCO listing formalised what was already understood. This is one of the most significant concentrations of Greek architecture outside Greece. A standard adult ticket to the archaeological park costs €10. EU citizens between 18 and 25 pay a reduced rate of €5, and those under 18 get in free, which is one of the few perks of being young and European. Just 10 kilometres west of the Valley of the Temples, you'll stumble upon a rather strange tourist attraction of Sicily, the Scala dei Turchi, or the Turkish Steps. Back in the 1600s, pirates from the Ottoman Empire used to raid the Sicilian coast. They'd sail over, park their ships in the cove below this cliff, and then climb up the natural rock steps to go and raid the local towns. And the Sicilians named the staircase after the people who kept robbing them. And by the way, they weren't all Turkish. The raiders were Turkish, Berber, Arab, North African, all sorts, but the Sicilians just called them all Turks. The rise of the Turkish steppes as a tourist destination is a phenomenon of the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Andrea Camilleri was a Sicilian author, born in Porto Empedocle, just down the road. He wrote the enormously popular Inspector Montalbano detective novels, which were adapted into an Italian television series. Scala dei Turchi appeared in the series, and suddenly millions of Italian viewers became aware that this white cliff was a real place you could actually visit. The cliff is made of marl. It's a sedimentary rock, a mix of clay and calcium carbonate, and it's very soft. And over millions of years, wind and rain and waves have eroded it into these smooth, stepped layers like a staircase, which is beautiful and poetic, and also means the cliff is actively falling apart at all times. It's in a state of perpetual collapse. It just does it very slowly. In 2020, a whole section just fell off. Fortunately, nobody was on it at the time, and people still climb all over it. 700,000 people a year, walking on a cliff made of compressed chalk dust. Every footstep wears it down. There's also this tradition where you take the wet marl from the base of the cliff and smear it on your face and body, like a mud mask. They call it natural Sicilian skincare. Some dermatologists have said the pH is actually quite alkaline and could irritate your skin, so it's possible that tourists are giving themselves a rash. The Aeolian Islands are an archipelago of 7 volcanic islands in the Tyrrhenian Sea, north of Sicily. Each island has its unique characteristics, but they all share certain commonalities: volcanic origins, limited fresh water, and excellent views. Volcano is the closest island to Sicily, within shouting distance of the mainland. Stromboli sits at the far northeastern end, dramatically isolated. There are also a handful of smaller islets and rocks that technically count as part of the archipelago. The islands receive almost 300,000 visitors per year. Most of them come between June and September. Tourism has transformed the Aeolian economy, overwhelmingly for the better in financial terms. Islands that were losing population now have a viable economic base. Properties that were worth very little are now worth a great deal. Liberty Lines operates inter-island hydrofoil routes that connect all 7 islands. Journey times are short. If you survive the flight to Sicily, the bus to Milazzo, and the boat across the water, then you've earned your lunch. Many private boat tour operators offer day trips to various islands and combinations thereof. A popular itinerary is the Lipari-Panarea-Stromboli day trip, which departs from Lipari in the morning. The entire archipelago was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2000 on account of its outstanding geological importance. Lipari is the largest island in the chain and the administrative capital of the archipelago. The main town, also called Lipari, is built around a fortified citadel. The island has 12,000 inhabitants. That means it holds more than half the population of the entire archipelago. Volcano is the southernmost of the main islands and the closest to Sicily. It is also, rather importantly, the island that gave us the word volcano. The main crater, Gran Cratere della Fossa, is a relatively easy climb. It's about an hour from the base to the rim along a path. The views from the top are excellent. You can see Lipari and the coastline of Sicily. The volcanic system here is far from dead. Heat from a cooling magma body at depth drives a vigorous hydrothermal system. Groundwater is heated, turns to steam, mixes with volcanic gases, and escapes through fumaroles. Stromboli is the star of the Aeolian archipelago. The island is the summit of a large stratovolcano that rises 3,000 meters from the seafloor, of which 924 meters are above water. The main villages are on the northeastern side. The houses are built low and painted white. Stromboli is one of the most continuously active volcanoes on Earth. It erupts small bursts of lava every few minutes. That's a phenomenon called strombolian eruption and was named after this volcano. Because eruptions are frequent but usually small, sailors historically called it the lighthouse of the Mediterranean. Noto is a small town of 24,000 people, 30 kilometers southwest of Syracuse. The big earthquake destroyed Noto completely, but here's where the story takes a turn. Instead of rebuilding on the same site, the decision was made to start fresh, and this time it was going to be done properly. The architects and urban planners, Giuseppe Lanza, Rosario Gagliardi, and a handful of others, whose names sound like they belong on a particularly good bottle of wine, designed the new town from scratch. They went full Baroque. No holds barred, every surface must have a cherub on it Baroque. The result is what you see today, one of the finest small towns in all of Sicily. Noto is built along one main street. You guess it, it's Corso Vittorio Emanuele. It runs east to west, which was a clever choice, so that the buildings would catch the light throughout the day. 3 piazzas punctuate the street, each one anchored by a church. It's a very structured sort of beauty. They actually thought about urban planning here, which is more than can be said for most towns in Sicily. There's a certain polish to the main streets. The Corso is pedestrianised, and the restaurant terraces are neatly arranged. It's a town that knows people come to look at it. The tourism infrastructure is still developing. There are some excellent restaurants and a few very good hotels, but there are also a fair number of mediocre tourist traps along the Corso that serve indifferent food at inflated prices. The classic warning signs apply. Photos of the dishes and a man standing outside trying to wave you in. Avoid these. Walk 2 streets back from the Corso and you'll find places where the locals eat. The Cathedral of San Niccolò is the most prominent building in Noto, and it's had a rather eventful time of it. Built in the early 18th century, it stood for nearly 300 years before the dome collapsed in 1996. Yes, it just fell in. One day there was a dome, the next day there was a pile of rubble and a great deal of embarrassment. The cause was a combination of structural weakness and poor earlier restorations. The restoration took 11 years and cost a small fortune. Noto doesn't sit in isolation. It's part of the Val di Noto, a region in southeastern Sicily that includes several other towns rebuilt after the 1693 earthquake, all of them in the same Baroque style. The whole lot of them are collectively listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site under the banner Late Baroque Towns of the Val di Noto. If you haven't heard of Marzamemi, don't worry. Neither had most people until fairly recently. This tiny fishing village on the southeastern tip of Sicily has, over the past couple of decades, gone from a quiet, salt-crusted hamlet to one of the most talked-about coastal destinations on the island. Marzamemi is not a town. It's a village. A part of a village, really. It falls under the municipality of Pachino, which itself is a small town in the province of Syracuse, and which is mostly famous for producing those intensely sweet cherry tomatoes that turn up in every upmarket supermarket in Europe with a little Italian flag on the packaging. Why does Marzamemi have a village here at all? Tuna, that's the short answer. Marzamemi's Tonara, a tuna processing facility, and the complex of buildings around it, is the historical centerpiece of the village. Tuna traps were set up at various points around the coast of Sicily to intercept the bluefin tuna on their annual migration through the Mediterranean. The fish would be herded into a series of net chambers and eventually into a final enclosure, the Camera della Morte, which is about as cheerful as it sounds, where they were hauled out of the water in a ritual known as the Matanza. The Matanza was brutal and enormously important to the local economy. It sustained entire communities along the Sicilian coast for hundreds of years. The last Matanza in Marzamemi took place in the 1960s, when declining tuna stocks and changing fishing methods made the practice unviable. Marzamemi has one piazza. Piazza Regina Margherita is the heart of the village. It's a small, roughly rectangular open space paved in stone, surrounded on three sides by low buildings and open to the sea on the fourth. There are two small harbours, one on each side of the piazza, and fishing boats sit in both. Some of those boats do still go out. The piazza is where everything happens in Marzamemi. The local restaurants serve tuna in every conceivable form: raw, grilled, in pasta, on bruschetta, and preserved in oil. Here's something you might not expect from a village of 300 people. Marzamemi hosts a film festival. It takes place every summer, usually in July, and screens independent and art house films in the piazza. The festival, along with the summer tourist season, provides a welcome boost in activity and income. Outside of the summer months, it's extremely quiet here. Marzamemi in winter is a different proposition entirely. Most of the restaurants close, and the permanent population retreats into its own routines. Marzamemi has some good beaches. The coastline in this region is excellent, and the village benefits from its position on one of the most scenic stretches of coast in Sicily. The closest beach to the village centre is the small sandy area near the southern harbour. It's tiny, it gets crowded quickly, and it's not the best option if you want space. The beach at San Lorenzo, about 3 kilometres south, is a long sandy stretch with clear water and good swimming. What's your favourite place in Sicily? Leave a comment and let us know. If you loved this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to World Travel Guide.